Hello, welcome to LSU Baseball Tournament Update, brought to you by Hancock Whitney. I'm Patrick McGee, and I'm joined by Wilson Alexander, who's usually on the LSU football beat, but it's Omaha time, so he's getting pulled into more baseball coverage, and he's no stranger to covering LSU baseball, so it's an easy transition for him. What was it like covering the Super Regional, and what kind of takeaways do you have kind of to give us over a fairly dominant weekend for LSU?
Well, just that LSU did exactly what it needed to in order to advance to the College World Series. Paul Skeens was dominant in Game 1 against Kentucky, and the offense was just fantastic, scoring 14 runs. And in that second game, obviously a much closer game, LSU came through with timely hits, the Cade Beloso home run, the Dylan Cruz two-out double, which was what a moment for him, finally in his career with a chance to go to Omaha. Comes into the batter's box. LSU's, of course, leading 5-3, but he puts sort of that final nail in the coffin right after Gavin Guidry had escaped some trouble as Kentucky tried to at least tie the game. And so LSU just was really in control the entire weekend. And now when you look back over the last two weekends with the regional and the super regional, LSU kind of toward the end of the regular season was a little bit up and down. I think it was 7-7 in its last 14 games. And it feels like it might have heated up a little bit right at the right time in order to be going into Omaha with quite a bit of momentum.
Yeah, just from what I saw, it looked easy for LSU throughout the run. And, I looked at the regional in the field and I didn't say, well, that's one LSU should win. And then Kentucky's a team, typically, they're more talented than Kentucky. My question was the obvious one, you kind of answered it, is like, was it easy for them, or are they just that hot right now? It just seems like they make every mistake. They take advantage of every mistake the opposing pitcher makes. How hot are they right now?
Well, I guess if you're to make a Zoolander reference, so hot right now. They really are, though. They're swinging the bats well, and LSU's been doing that all year. That's really no different from what they've done throughout the season. The best offense in the SEC statistically, and they've been able to maintain that here throughout the postseason, particularly in a 13-7 win over Oregon State, and then that 14-0 win over Kentucky, and they've gotten the hits when they've needed them. Even in the one game that was kind of tight against Oregon State in that pivotal second day of a regional. LSU won 6-5. All that coming on home runs, and it just felt like LSU was always in control. And I think really the reason, though, that this team is hot right now is because of what you're getting out of the pitching staff. LSU has not had to go deep into the bullpen either weekend. The way that Paul Skeens sort of sets the tone in that first game has been great. Got a great appearance out of Thatcher Hurd. Riley Cooper has been really key over these last 2 weekends, giving some distance and linked out of the bullpen. Gavin Guidry, what he gave you in the super regional clincher was big. And so, Ty Floyd in his two starts hasn't gone very long. His pitch count has gotten up pretty high. And then, of course, one of those was a weather delay. And so just to see the bullpen coming along, I think is what really signals that this team is hot right now, because it's playing clean baseball and it's getting a lot out of its pitching staff.
Next up for LSU is Tennessee at 6:00 on Saturday in Omaha, and we're going from Zoolander to Dolander for Tennessee. And you have I caught a good bit of the Hattiesburg Super Regional. Southern Miss got Game 1 in that. Southern Miss was in position to possibly win Game 2 up 4-0, and then one inning, Southern Miss kind of falls apart. And then what you saw was Tennessee's pitching staff just took over, and Dolander, it was more than Dolander. Drew Beam last night hit, throw 96. His secondary stuff was electric. It just seemed like not everybody really not every pitcher they put on the mound controlled Southern Miss, but they all had great stuff. Still, Seth Halverson in that first game gave him a shot. Really, this feels like kind of a matchup where Tennessee's strength is LSU's weakness, in that depth on the pitching staff for LSU is a little bit of a concern. But as long as they get outings out of their starting rotation, that becomes less of a glaring concern. Do you get the feeling at this point through their starting rotation for LSU that they can get them deep in the games throughout Omaha, or is it still kind of wait and see until they face a talented lineup like Tennessee?
It's a little wait and see. In the first game, you're going to get a deep start, most likely out of Paul Skeens. That's what he's done all year, with just like very few exceptions. And so you feel good about that first game. Well, to me, it's really the second, third games, just because in the last two outings, Ty Floyd has only pitched 3 innings. One of those, like we said, was for weather. The other one against Kentucky, Jay Johnson pulled him. In both times, even though he only pitched, either of those weather that took him out of the game in the regional, his pitch count was really high, and so LSU was going to have to go to the bullpen sooner rather than later in that game anyway, unless he suddenly had some just really low pitch innings. And so he's got to be able to go a little bit further into the game. And Jay Johnson has spoken highly of Ty Floyd a lot recently. Thinks that those outings aren't quite representative of what he's done throughout the year, because he has been a pretty solid number 2 throughout the season. But he's got to be able to push a little bit deeper into games, because it would just set LSU up so well. LSU is still, I think, a team that could overcome it if he did only give you maybe 3 innings in the second game that LSU plays. It's got, like we said, Riley Cooper, Thatcher Hurd, who has been an essential piece of this pitching staff recently, with the distance that he's been able to go, 5 innings in most of his recent outings, and didn't even have to pitch in the super regional. And he's available to start or come out of the bullpen. Jamin Coleman hasn't been used in a few weeks because of the way LSU's pitching staff has done. And so I think they've got the guys, but you run into a situation where if one of them doesn't go very deep into a game, then you're vulnerable, I think is probably the right word for it. And especially if you then lose the game and have to go out of the loser's bracket and play a little bit longer, then you're, again, more vulnerable because you have to just dip further and further into a staff that, while it has some reliable guys, there was a point in a few points in the season where you worried, and there's just so many of those top guys that are out, like with Garrett Edwards and that kind of thing. And so to answer your question more succinctly, I think there's still some vulnerabilities, but especially if LSU is able to win its first 2 games and get a long start out of Ty Floyd, then it's in a really good position to make it to the championship series.
Right, and it's kind of a weird deal in college baseball where the College World Series is quite different compared to the regional and super regional setup where you're playing every other day. It's almost like you got to, it's not where you're playing every day, and it's easy to get the guys fired up and ready to go. In the pool play situation, do you think LSU is set up well for that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's got Tennessee, and it's it's a team that LSU's players and Coach Jay Johnson said today that it's kind of funny now that LSU has played at some point during the postseason a team that it has already played before: Tulane, Kentucky, and now Tennessee. And every time the line from LSU was that these are different teams than they saw during the regular season. And Tennessee, I think, is the same way. LSU saying today that the pitching has been restructured a little bit different. The lineup seems to know what it wants to do, and it looks like it's more comfortable. But this is still a team that LSU beat during the regular season, and I think is going to have a good read on. And so then when you start to look into the rest of pool play, it kind of goes one game at a time. You got to see who LSU draws and such in the second game. But I just feel like this is a team that is capable of getting off to a good start with Skeens, and especially if we can win that second game, I like his chances of advancing to a championship series.
What kind of swagger did you see out of LSU this super regional?
Oh, so much. I mean, this is a team that is not lacking in that regard at all. You're seeing a lot more emotion out of this team during the postseason as well, especially out of leader Dylan Cruz, best player on the field, but usually the most stoic of players on the field. He doesn't really wear his emotions on his sleeve, never gets too high or low, and you're seeing a little bit more out of him. In the regional, he was, pointing at the crowd after a big home run after that weather delay on that Saturday and getting them pumped up. And you saw after his RBI double there in the super regional clincher, pointing at his jersey and lifting up where it says Tigers and just sort of being a lot more emotional. And the rest of his team has always been that way. Trey Morgan, gets very excited after sort of anything that he is able to do. Tommy White is pretty boisterous, and a lot of these guys are the same way. And it's kind of funny you mentioned swagger in sort of a quirky way. Getting a lot of that kind of out of Hayden Travinsky too. He's extremely confident, and a lot of the players on the team have shirts that he gave to them. He brought them to the locker room and was like, "Hey, do you want a shirt with my sort of likeness on the front and name and number on the back?" And they all to see it really embraced it. They wear them a lot, and so this is definitely not a team that's lacking in that regard in any way. And it feels very confident going into Omaha, but not in a way that's sort of cocky and unwarranted either. I feel like they've sort of earned that ability to feel that way about their chances. And that Jay Johnson expects them to be able to turn that into execution when they actually get on the field and play at 6 p.m. Saturday against Tennessee.
Okay. Forget about the baseball for a minute. What are you looking forward to most going to Omaha?
Well, I've never been. You mentioned kind of at the top of the show that I used to cover, when I first got to the Advocate, LSU baseball was my sort of year-round beat. And I did that for 3 seasons, although one of those was the COVID season, which barely happened. We didn't even get to see play. And so
you feel cheated over that. You feel cheated.
I suppose, it's something that when you cover LSU baseball, you sort of figure that it's going to happen. And now this is, the longest drought that LSU has had since it went to the College World Series for the first time. So it's sort of a return for LSU to be able to go again for the first time since 2017. I can't wait to see how the fans turn out up there because they love going to Omaha. Omaha loves having them. That Jello shot challenge at one of those bars, pizza place, Roca's, I think it's called, is going to get crushed by LSU fans, I would expect. And so for me personally, though, I just looking forward to seeing it for the first time. I really don't know what to expect because I haven't covered it before. But to have started my career as the LSU baseball writer here, to get to go is going to be, I think, quite a fun experience.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's happier in Omaha other than the bar owners in the vicinity of the baseball stadium. The LSU is there. I appreciate it, Wilson. We'll, as long as LSU keeps winning, we'll keep having you back for the LSU baseball tournament update. I think we've got Leah Van lined up for Friday, but I appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate you again tuning in for the LSU baseball tournament update brought to you by Hancock Whitney.